I'm going to show you how to do a setup on a Stratocaster using this beautiful 1996 American Standard. Okay, before we get started, I want to say a couple of things about setups. Now, I've set up a lot of guitars without using any kind of measuring tools or anything like that, just by feel. I've been working on guitars my whole life and I'm comfortable doing that. But I think most people, especially people who are new to guitar setups, are going to find it a lot easier to put the guitar in a good playing condition just using the recommended factory setup numbers or specifications. And most of the manufacturers will have those things published on their website that can be downloaded. I'm going to be using the one from Fender. So this is a 1996 model. Fender actually has a 1998 manual online that can be downloaded, so I'll put that up so you can see it and link to it in the description also. We're going to use the numbers from that and maybe some of the numbers from the current catalogs, which are a little bit different, so I'll explain as we go along. So I'm going to show you the tools I'm going to be using to do this, and it's just a couple of things. Again, this is just a basic setup. I'm not going to replace the strings on here. These are new strings, so there's no reason to cut these off and put new ones on. I'm going to use a Jim Dunlop string action gauge to measure some of the stuff on the guitar, and I'm going to use this automotive feeler gauge, which is 10/1000ths of an inch. That's Fender's recommended setup specification for the neck relief, so we'll talk more about that in a second. Also a factory style Allen key that fits this guitar for the truss rod. A couple of Phillips head screwdrivers, a couple of different sizes, and I'm actually going to replace the Strat buttons on this too, and I'll explain why. The ones that are on here are not the original Strat buttons, and they're really not very nice, so I'm going to put something original and correct on it. And I'm actually going to need a flathead screwdriver to take the old ones off. Also, good accurate tuner. This is my Sonic Research S2200, so we can get a really accurate intonation measurement with that. And then one other thing too, this is a simple just sticky style notepad. You can use a post-it notepad. I'm going to show you how to set the tremolo. If you set it to the factory specification, which is going to be floating, I'm going to show you how to use this to set that really quickly without having to retune and reset things a whole bunch of times. So here we go. All right, so we need to do things in a particular order and stick with that order when we're doing a setup. And it's going to be on any guitar, not just a Stratocaster. So the first thing is always get the guitar in tune. You can always start there. And if I was going to put new strings on it, I'd do that first and kind of pull them in a little bit, stretch them in a little bit, and then I would tune it up. Okay, so guitar's in tune. So you could really either set the neck relief first, or if I'm going to adjust the floating amount on the tremolo, either one of those you could do first. I'm just going to start with the neck relief since I already have it in tune. We'll just get that set. And so the way I'm going to do that, Fender recommends 10/1000ths of an inch. So what that means, a guitar neck generally is not going to play very well if it's dead straight, right? So if we use the strings as a straight edge, if I press down at one end and then the other, if the string is laying flat across all the frets so that the neck is straight, you're usually going to get some buzz on the fretboard, usually towards the front of the neck if there's not enough relief, so on the lower frets. And all relief means is that there is some sort of curvature. The neck is actually sort of a bit concave from one end of the other, so bowing like as you see the guitar like that, right? So you can do that by feel, and I've done that a lot of times. You just want a little bit there, and some people play harder. They like a little bit more relief. Some people who like really low action and are kind of shredders, they're going to want less relief. But Fender recommends, and this would be a good starting point, 10/1000ths of an inch, and so that's measured at the 8th fret. Let me show you how to do that. So I'm just going to use the string as a straight edge. I don't need to use any kind of separate device to lay across the frets to do that, to get that measurement. And so what I'm going to do is press the string down at the 1st fret and then also at the end of the fingerboard, and that's going to allow the string to act as a straight edge across the fretboard. So I don't actually have a capo. I do, but I can't ever find the thing. So I'll show you a quick little trick you can do with a couple of picks. So I'm going to take these two picks. I've got a Fender medium and a Fender heavy here, but probably a couple of heavy picks or a couple of mediums. Anything's going to work pretty well. So I'm going to wedge that between the strings so that I'm actually using the pick to press down the low E string. And we only need to use one string to do this. We don't have to measure with all the strings, just the top E string or low E string would be fine. So I'm going to let the pick lay down across the fret to hold that end down, and then I'm just going to hold the other end down with my hand, and then I can actually measure with this feeler gauge. Okay, I can see this one has a little bit too much relief in it now. So I'm going to want to straighten this neck a little bit. So the way that I'm going to do that, most truss rods, some of the fenders adjust down at the neck end. Sometimes you actually have to take the neck off, a little, at least pop it up a little bit to adjust that. Some guitars are going to adjust at the peg head end. All these standard American fenders are going to be peg head adjusters. The American guitars are going to have what are called biflex truss rods or double action truss rods, which means if I turn the thing clockwise, it's going to tighten the truss rod, and it's actually going to straighten the neck out. It's going to pull it this way. And if I loosen the truss rod, it's going to allow the strings to pull it this way, because really this is just a balance between the truss rod and the string tension, right? So if I loosen the strings, it's going to allow the strings to pull the neck that way, more concave, and so add relief to the neck. And but these biflex truss rods, actually, when they get to when the truss rod becomes completely loose, if there's not enough relief in the neck, you can actually keep turning that thing. It'll catch again. So keep turning it counterclockwise. It'll actually start to add relief to the neck. The truss rod itself will do that. So in order to straighten the neck, I'm going to turn the truss rod clockwise. It's generally going to be the case with most truss rods. So that's as I'm looking at the nut. So from this orientation, as I look at it, it's going to be clockwise. So I'm going to tighten the neck a little bit. I've got the guitar in tune. And I like to just pull it a little bit with my hand too if I'm going to be straightening the neck, just to kind of push the neck in position a little bit and let the truss rod kind of take the slack up a little bit, instead of this the truss rod actually having to pull the neck in position. So I'm just going to push with my hand a little bit and hold with my forearm here. And I just gave that maybe 1/8 of a turn. So the deal with truss rods, you never want to turn very much. Start with about 1/8 of a turn in either direction. If a truss rod is close, if it's somewhere close to where it needs to be already, I can't imagine ever having to go more than half a turn. You don't want to get in and be cranking on these things. And if it's too tight and it won't move, or it's not moving the neck when you adjust it, unless you're experienced working on guitars, you may want to take it to your local guitar setup guy or luthier and let them take a look at it. If the truss rod's functioning properly though, this one seems to be working great, then it shouldn't be an issue for anybody to adjust. Again, if you just don't go crazy with it, just a little bit goes a long way. So let's measure and see where we are now. It's close, but I'm going to give it just a little bit more. It really had too much relief. So again, I'm going to pull the neck in position. This truss rod is nice and smooth. Okay, so that's right on. Now, some people will let these sit overnight, and you can check it again the next day. They can move a little sometimes, but I find on guitars, if the neck there's nothing wrong with the neck of the truss rod, when you set them, they tend to stay. Now, they'll move from seasonal changes. Humidity and temperature, especially humidity, will affect the necks. Where I live, in the winter, when it gets drier here, my necks tend to get straighter. This time of year, when it's 100% humidity, the necks tend to have a little bit more relief. So you may have to make some seasonal adjustments, but from day to day, they really shouldn't change that much. And another reason you might have to make a truss rod adjustment is if you change gauge strings. So again, the truss rod is acting as a counter force on the pull of the string. So it's this balance between the string tension and the truss rod, and it's going to hold the neck. Those two things are going to put the neck in a position which is the correct amount of relief for that neck. Okay, so now that we have the truss rod set, the next thing I'm going to do is set the tremolo on this. So Fender recommends setting this so that the base plate of the tremolo, the back of the plate, is about 1/8 of an inch off of the body, and that allows the tremolo to float. And most people seem to like that. Some people like them bottomed all the way out. Some people may want a little bit more float. Some people, like Eric Clapton, actually have a block of wood in the back of his to keep the tremolo from moving at all. But we're going to set it up to Fender's recommended factory specification, which is about 1/8 of an inch back here. Now, the amount of float or movement in the tremolo is going to be a balance between the string tension and the springs that are in the back of the guitar. So I'm going to pull this cover off so we can adjust the springs, because I can tell from looking at this it's a little bit off. So what I'm going to do first is take the back plate off of the guitar so we can get to the tremolo springs. You know, I find the older I get, the more I like Stratocasters. It used to not be my favorite style guitar. And I still like all the other guitars too. I love Telecasters and Gibsons and Gretches and everything, but I really like Strats. And I actually don't love the 2 and 4 positions as much as the 1, 3, and 5, the pickups by themselves. And so I'm going to put the tremolo arm on this too. Now, in order to get the distance from the base plate of the bridge to the body in the back to about where I wanted, if I tighten the springs with these two adjustments on the claw, there are two Phillips head screws here. If I tighten those springs, it's going to want to pull the plate down towards the guitar. So it's going to pull it like, you can see this like that. And if I loosen them, it's going to loosen the tension on those springs, and it's going to let the strings pull the bridge up. So what I'm trying to do is find a balance between the strings tuned to pitch and these springs to get the bridge where I want it. Now you could just keep screwing the springs in, and every time you do that, it's going to detune the guitar. It's going to go sharp. You're going to have to retune. It's going to cause the bridge to move back this way. It's going to be back and forth, and you can do that. That'll work, but this is probably going to be a little easier. So I've got a notepad here, like just a sticky notepad, and you can pull off enough pages to get this to the thickness that you need. And I've got it at just right at 1/8 of an inch, maybe a couple of sheets more, because I think it's going to compress just a little bit when I put it in. So this is about the thickness of the distance I want between the base plate and the body. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually push the tremolo bar up, and I'm going to put this right underneath, right between the body and the trem plate, so it's going to rest on this. So I want the guitar, once it's tuned up, to have the tremolo in about this orientation, so it's actually a little bit forward of where it was. And I'm going to tighten up the springs just a little bit so that it's pulling pretty tightly, so that the springs are pulling the bridge pretty tight against this post-it sticky note thing I have in the back here, because I don't want it to move whenever I tune the guitar. So I'm just going to give them a couple of turns each spring, because this is not that far off. The idea is to get the bridge to sit flush against the sticky pad here, even when I tune it back up. I don't want it to move off of this as I tune it. Okay, so the guitar's in tune. Now, so I know the guitar's in tune with the bridge in the position that I want it in right now. So I'm going to pull this sticky note back out, and I think the guitar's probably going to go sharp when I do that, because it's going to let the strings, the springs in the back of the guitar pull the tremolo down this way, which is going to pull the string sharp. Let's see if that happens. Hear that? So now they're pretty sharp. But all I need to do is loosen the tremolo springs in the back until I get it back to where it's pretty close to in tune, and I'm going to be right where I need to be, or pretty close to it. So let's take a couple of turns and see where we are. Just a little bit sharp still. And this doesn't have to be right on. This is not like the intonation on the guitar, or the string action, or the relief. This just needs to be close. And this will get you really close easily. It's a little bit flat. I went a little bit too far, so I'm just going to give each one of these screws a little bit of a tighten. And I got 3 springs in the back of this guitar. So, right where I need to be, and I got the bridge set right where I want it. Easy. So I'm going to put the tremolo spring cover back on the guitar, and we'll get to the next step, which is setting the action on the guitar. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is set the string height or action on the guitar. Fender's specification when this guitar was made was for the 2 lowest strings, the A and the E string, to be about 6/64 from the 17th fret, and the other 4 strings to be about 5/64 from the 17th fret. If you look at their newer manuals, it's 4/64 across all 6 strings. So anywhere in there is going to work pretty well. So from 4/64 to 6/64 across any of the strings, whatever you prefer to play. The way I generally will set up a Fender guitar like this, I'm going to set it from 5/64 on the low string at the 17th fret, and I'm going to graduate down to 4/64 on the high E string, and just try to get a slight graduation down. So kind of 5/64 on maybe the first 3 strings, and 4/64 on the high 3 strings. We'll see how that goes. So I'm going to use this Jim Dunlop string action gauge to measure. You can use other tools. This thing's really inexpensive. I think I got it on Amazon. It's $10 or $12. Stu Mac makes one. I'm sure that's a really nice tool. And but these work great. You can use them to measure all kinds of stuff on the guitar. So I'm going to measure this at the 17th fret, and it's going to be from the top of the fret to the bottom of the string. And I can see this action is about an 1/8 inch. About an 1/8 of an inch now, so it's pretty high. So I'm going to lower that a little bit to try to get it where it needs to be. And so I'm just going to use the correct Allen key for the bridge. I don't know if I mentioned that at the beginning of the video, but you'll need the Allen key that fits your bridge too. Sometimes it's a little flathead screwdriver. On most guitars, it's going to be some sort of small Allen key. And generally, the bridge Allen key and the truss rod Allen key will come with the guitar, even for inexpensive guitars. That seems to be the case. And so just hang on to those and use those. So I'm going to lower the bridge saddles a little bit and retune the string and see where we are. We're close, just one more. The action was pretty high on this guitar. All right, so I had to tweak one other thing. This is a 2-point Fender Tremolo, style tremolo. This is going to be on most of the American guitars now. It's going to be on like the Player series and the Made in Mexico guitars. These are not really to adjust the height of the strings. In fact, most of the time these are going to be screwed down as far as they'll go without over tightening. Fender has some suggestions in the manual to tell you how to kind of check that, but most of the time they're going to be screwed all the way down. You're actually going to adjust the action of the guitar with the saddles and the Allen screws in the saddles. Whoever adjusted this guitar last time tried to raise the strings up by using these 2 screws, and they were actually raised up quite a bit. So those are back where they need to be now. It's not going to affect what we did with the springs on the tremolo or the relief on the neck, so it'll just affect the string action. Now I've got the low E string about where I want it. I'm going to check the other strings. Again, about 5/64 for this guitar, from the top of the 17th fret to the bottom of the string at the 17th fret, and about 4/64 on the other 4 strings. So I'm going to go ahead and set those. Okay, so I got the strings set to the height that I want them. So what have we done? We adjusted the relief on the neck. We got the tremolo floating just the way that we want, and now I've set the string height on the guitar. You need to do the things in the correct order, and so the next thing that we're going to do is set the intonation on the guitar. Okay, we're going to tackle the intonation now. Now, when fretted instruments are fretted, there's just a simple formula that's used, which takes into account the length of the string. So the length of the string is going to be the distance between the nut on the guitar and the end of the bridge saddle on the guitar. And so all the frets will be laid in according to this formula, so that when you press a note, it'll be in tune and play the correct pitch at that position. For example, this Stratocaster and most Fender guitars are going to be 25.5 inches. So that's 25.5 inches between the nut and the bridge saddle. And so you could just adjust the string to that length and everything would play in tune, except for the fact that we're pressing the string down to fret a note, and that's essentially stretching the string, dynamically stretching the string slightly, which is going to cause it to go sharp. And so in order to compensate for that, we have to actually adjust the length of the string for each string, and that's going to depend on how high or low the action is. The higher the action, the farther I have to press the note to the fretboard, and the more it's going to stretch the string out dynamically, and the more it's going to make the note go sharp. There's more than one way to do this. If you have a way that's working for you, go ahead and do that. I do it like this and get good intonation. This works a lot better with new strings than old strings, but that's always going to be the case when you're setting intonation. So what I'm going to do, I've got a really accurate tuner here, and I'm going to use this to set the intonation. So I'm going to make sure the guitar's back in tune, perfectly in tune first. Okay, so I'm just going to start with the low E string, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the harmonic at the 12th fret, and I'm going to check the tuning on that. I'll set this here so we can maybe all see it. You can kind of see that. I can see it's a little bit sharp. And I'm going to get it really close. Try to get it to stay still. That's pretty close. This is a really accurate tuner. Now I'm going to fret the note at the 12th fret, the octave E on the low E string. And you can see that's actually flat of the harmonic. Harmonic's still a little sharp actually. So you can see that's pretty flat, right? So if the fretted note at the 12th fret is flat of the harmonic at the 12th fret, then I actually need to shorten the string, right? I'm going to use a little screwdriver to do that. So if the string is actually, if the fretted note, if the 12th fret is flat of the harmonic, I need to move the bridge saddle, I say forward, I mean towards the nut of the guitar, towards the neck like this. So this takes a minute to do. You just kind of go back and forth, and you can be as precise as you want with it. The good news is once you get a guitar set up like this, if you stick with the same brand and gauge strings, things shouldn't move too much out of adjustment. Really, after you kind of get it set up, all you should ever really have to adjust is the neck, just for seasonal neck relief. All right, that's really close. I'm going to be happy with that. And I'm going to move on and do the other 5 strings the same way. If the note is flat of the harmonic, we're actually going to make the string shorter. And if it's sharp of the harmonic, we're going to make the string slightly longer. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so the next thing to do really the last thing to do on a basic guitar setup is going to be the pickup height. And again, I'm just going to stick with Fender's recommended factory setup specification. And it's going to depend on the pickups. These are just the standard American pickups that came in this guitar. And what they recommend is pressing the string at the last fret on the guitar and then measuring the distance between the string and the top of the pole piece for each pickup. And so on the low string side, so we only have to measure 2 strings because we can't adjust the individual pickup pole pieces. So we're going to adjust the at the high E side and at the low E side. So when I press the string down, the distance between the string and the pole piece needs to be about 6/64 of an inch, and on the high string about 5/64 of an inch, and that's for each pickup. So I'm going to use my handy string action gauge to measure that too. It's nice and small, it's easy to get in there and easy to work with, and it's accurate. I've measured this against a ruler that I know is accurate, and the settings that I use on here are accurate or super close. Okay, so I'm checking this, and this bridge pickup is way too high. And this is going to be fairly individual too. You may want to set the bridge pickup hotter. You may want to set the neck lower. If you get it set up to the factory specifications and tweak it from there, that's, for most people, that's probably going to be the best thing to do. And it's going to play and sound great if you just put it back into position with these numbers and a couple of simple instruments like this. So the pickup's a little bit too high. I'm going to lower it just a little bit. Okay, that's pretty good. It's also a little bit too high. Okay, that's right on. So 6/64 on the low E side and 5/64 on the high E side. And I'm going to do the other 2 pickups, and we'll come back and wrap up. Okay, so that's a basic setup on a Stratocaster. This same principles will apply to other guitars too. And so what did I do? Well, I just set this guitar back to its factory measured specifications that you can get from the manual. The manual's changed some from when this guitar was made to the current manual. Not a lot. The numbers are slightly different. The Fender's recommended action is a little bit lower now than it was then. I have this set somewhere in between the two actually, but with any guitar, especially if you're kind of new at doing setups, or even if you've been doing them a little while, you're never going to go too far off using the factory measurements. And it's easy to measure things too, rather than just trying to do it by feel, especially if you don't have a lot of experience. And really all I used was a string action gauge and this 10/1000 feeler gauge, which you can get from any automotive store. I like to clean these with a little bit of naphtha or alcohol or something when I get them, because they usually have some 3-in-1 oil on them to keep them from rusting. I don't want that on the guitar. The last thing I'm going to do, probably not going to put that on video, but I'm going to lubricate the nut. I'm going to detune these strings again and put a little lubricant in the nut. I use the Music Nomad product, the Tune It, whatever, lube every tune thing. There are others. They probably all work about the same. You can use just pencil graphite in there. But that helps, especially with a tremolo guitar, to help keep the guitar in tune when you're using the tremolo. I found a 2-point Strat tremolo like this will stay in tune pretty good if you get it set up right and everything's lubricated correctly. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to replace these rather incorrect strap buttons. My friend who owns this guitar bought this guitar used years ago, and I suspect whoever sold this guitar originally, whoever traded it in or sold it, probably took the original strap buttons off of it and put these on. These look like the little strap buttons you used to be able to get in any of the guitar shops. They would hang on a little cardboard plaque in the guitar shop, and you could just pull off the individual strap buttons and put those on your guitar. They were meant to kind of screw on like the cheap acoustic guitars. They have flathead screws, and they really don't look very good on here. And it's kind of a, they almost look like they're made out of aluminum or something. It's a real matte finish, but it's not nickel. So this guitar would have come originally with really what were Shaler strap buttons at the time. The Fenders used to come with Shaler strap locks, and these are Fender branded. I actually ordered these off Amazon, but this is a Fender branded Shaler strap button. And again, this would have been original equipment on this guitar in 1996. So I'm going to go ahead and just replace the strap buttons that are on here with these, because it just needs them. Unfortunately, I don't have any of the little felt washers that go between the strap button and the guitar. Actually, I do. I have a bunch of them somewhere, but I'm sure I can't put my hands on them right now. So we're not going to worry about that. It's going to be so much better than it was. All right, so that's a lot better. From time to time when I'd go to my friend's house and pick this guitar up, the first thing I'd always see were those Strat buttons, so it was driving me crazy. So there it is. We did a basic setup on this guitar. We set the neck relief. We set the pitch of the tremolo so we get it slightly floating. We set the string action. We set the intonation. We set the pickups, and we replaced these Strat buttons. And we did everything in the correct order. Used simple measuring tools, a couple of screwdrivers, a couple of Allen wrenches, and got a great setup on the guitar. And most guitars are going to set up fairly easily like this. If you run into any resistance or things won't turn, or when you're trying to adjust things, they don't adjust what they're supposed to be adjusting, like the neck, for example, and you don't have the experience, then go ahead and take it to somebody that's more experienced and let them work on the guitar. But for most people, you could do your own setups. It's an easy thing to do, and you don't have to take it and let somebody else do it. So yeah.